Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is Independence Day, the 4th of July, and today I had the honor of getting to go and see Angel Studios' new movie, Young Washington. So, I'm going to talk about it. And as you can see, I'm dressed in the colonial getup for the vibe. Alright, so let me get started. I've got a couple of notes here, and I've got a couple of other notes here. Let me start with my play-by-play notes. But just for a bit of context, Young Washington is a film that Angel Studios made this year, 2026. It covers the story of George Washington and his travels and adventures out in the Ohio River Valley during the French and Indian War. I've briefly touched on a bit of that history in some of my other YouTube videos, the ones that I've done on the French and Indian War / the 7 Years' War. If you haven't seen those, you might want to check them out. Never know. Alright, but let me get started here. So, look, I like the movie. However, the colors in the movie were definitely muted. You're not going to see any like bright red maroons like I'm wearing right now, or any like flashing colors. That's been a problem in just like movies in general as of late. It's definitely something that needs to be fixed. But yeah, a lot of muted colors, but they don't hamper the story. Like if you just come for the story and not necessarily the colors, then you're just gonna you can walk in to actually what's being conveyed. The fact that the colors are muted doesn't hamper the story in any way. Just don't expect don't expect the type of colors you might see in watching La La Land or something earlier made, a little bit back, say the 80s or anything like that. Alright, so in addition to that, I've got another gripe. And again, I did like the movie, and I'll get to some of the praises for it, but let me just address my notes as I have them. Fort Duquesne, the French fort that was built in the Ohio River Valley. Not gonna lie, in the movie they did not show any of the three rivers that were pretty significant to the area. I mean, the point of the French fort having them right there as they were was to control the flow of trade down those three rivers during that time. So the Monongahela River, the Allegheny River, the Ohio River, literally none of them were shown in relation to the fort. Because the fort was on a peninsula where you would have been able to see all three rivers from the fort, which is interesting that they didn't decide to include the rivers in any of the shots of the fort. So I don't know why they did that. It doesn't hamper the story in any way. Just me, being the historian that I am, was like, okay, that's an interesting choice. Alright. The third thing that stood out to me was the score. The score, it's not flashy, but it is good. It's a good grounded presence that matches the movie in each instance where it's used. So it's definitely not going to be Baroque or over the top in any way, shape, or form. But it is a good score. It's just not, not what I would have expected. I guess a lot of the movie is not what I would have expected, but I still liked it. The score definitely grew on me as time went on. The movie started and I was like, okay, the score is definitely here. It's definitely among us. But as time went on, the score just became more and more engaging. Definitely during the climactic battle, the score was and the soundtrack, everything was great. As well as the conclusion to the film also I have here. So give it a listen. It's by the guy who did the music for the Star Wars The Clone Wars TV show, as well as Star Wars The Bad Batch. Nobody knows about The Bad Batch except for me, I feel like, at this point. But, yeah, definitely go give it a listen. The movie also did raise some questions for me that now I'm going to have to go and research on my own time. Different things in the movie, one of the main native tribes that Washington interacted with was the Seneca tribe, and they were actually aiding the British. So I do remember researching that some tribes did aid the British instead of the French, but the majority of tribes did end up aiding the French, which ended up giving the war the name the French and Indian War. But definitely need to look into the Seneca tribe and figure out a little bit more about them and how exactly they navigated that time period, the alliances that they made and stuff like that. But as well as a couple of other things that stood out to me is the actor that they had play George Washington. I don't know if he was tall or if they just got average height people to play everyone else, but he was at least a head at least a head above the other people that they got to play, the other actors that they got to play, the other characters in the film. So definitely going to have to research exactly what George Washington's real height was in relation to, I guess, the movie. But also, as well as his upbringing, I don't know anything about his upbringing. So seeing it portrayed in the movie, I was like, okay, how much of this is accurate, and how much of this is like creative license in relation to what he went through? Okay. Yeah. Another thing, this is not a gripe. This actually made me lean forward in my seat when I saw it. Several of the shots in the movie are filmed in colonial Williamsburg. So maybe you don't know where that is. Williamsburg used to be the old capital of Virginia Colony. So it's a little by Yorktown, south of DC, over by Maryland area, Jamestown, if you're familiar with it, where the English showed up and created a colony. John Smith met Pocahontas. Pocahontas met John Smith. That all went down the historic triangle is what we call it now. But getting to see that area in the movie definitely, again, made me lean forward. I was like, oh, yo, I've been there. I went there on a school trip a couple of years ago. I need to go back at some point. Hey, maybe this year. We never know. We never know. All right. Another thing that I loved about the film is it was the interactions in the film were the perfect display of the contempt that the British had for the American colonists, as well as the lack of cultural understanding the Americans had for the English customs. So there was you could sense it. They didn't have to ham-fist it oh, we don't like you colonists because blank, blank, blank. You could just see it in how the actors were directed to interact with the actors that were playing the American colonists, or the other way around, how the actors that were playing the American colonists were interacting with the actors that were playing the Englishmen. So that was really great to see. This might have been what it actually was like to have power so advanced, so far away from a culture that's essentially made itself from nothing, and yet they still have to interact. They still have to fight this war together. So that was really great to see. Definitely a disconnect between the two cultures. I also have here in my notes, I like that they didn't explicitly, I think I might have already said it, but I like that they didn't explicitly say anything. They were oh, we don't like you guys because of, but it's you could pick up on the undertones and everything. It's okay. So there's actually some disconnect. All right. My next note is that, look, I'm going to be completely honest, watching the film, some of the times it did make me a little shift in my seat and squirm a little bit. The reason being is because I feel the target audience for this film was the classic American, you love America, but you don't know necessarily a bunch about the history, but you know George Washington was our president, you know his significance, but you don't know anything about his backstory or anything like this. So a lot of the, specifically in regards to the French and Indian War and its significance, a lot of things were left out. There were a lot of abridged events, a lot of events that were skipped entirely and left out, and then a couple of times due to the setting, the setting is in the colonies, so everything is from the colonial lens, oh, we're in the colonies, this is how we're seeing the world. They did say a couple of times, I have it quoted, I think, yeah, a couple of times, it was said oh, you just started a war, somebody would say to George Washington, you just started this war, and it's this grand war. The French and Indian War was a theater of the 7 Years' War, which was going on in Europe at the same time. So it's I mean, I see what you're saying. I understand, from the context, this makes sense. But at the same time, it's just me knowing that the 7 Years' War did happen and was technically more significant on a global scale than the French and Indian War. It's just oh, that's not an accurate statement. You can't say that, right? Yeah, but it was definitely made me squirm a couple of times. I was that's not true. There's stuff going on in Europe right now, bro. Definitely made me squirm a little bit. But again, I feel the movie was written for the classic American, just straight in off the street. You know a bit about America's history. You know the significant figures, but you might not know everything about them. So me as the history buff, again, there was a couple of times that they'd say stuff and be it's not accurate. Okay. Time to move to my smaller notepad. All right. Okay. Bear with me. All right. So definitely realized it was a really intentional move to release the movie. They released it July 3rd, yesterday, July 3rd, 2026. And while watching the movie, the date July 3rd was referenced, but it was referenced in relation to George Washington's defeat at Fort Necessity, the fort that they ended up building after they ended up getting into some trouble with the French. And it was right outside of French territory. So George Washington essentially lost on the day that they made a movie about his triumph. Further down the line, multiple years later, and it's wow, that was a cool twist to release a movie praising George Washington on the eve of his greatest, maybe not his greatest defeat, definitely his greatest defeat in that conflict. So that was an intentional move that I thought was pretty cool. Also, maybe you've seen Hamilton, maybe you know a little bit about George Washington's defeat at Fort Necessity. The song "History Has Its Eyes on You" just came to mind, just him singing in the play, the guy that plays George Washington singing about how he was defeated in this battle, but it essentially made him who he was. Yeah, but that's another thing that I have. The hero's journey only works if the hero fails, and so getting to see an accurate display of George Washington's failure at Fort Necessity during the French and Indian War, and seeing in the movie, I want to say in real time, but it wasn't real time, but getting to see how they portrayed him learning from his defeat pretty soon afterward. The climactic battle definitely has some things that I've researched myself, where it's George Washington learned from the tactics his enemies were using against him, where his British counterparts didn't, because they were they came from a technologically superior culture very far away from where they were actually engaging in the conflict. So they came with a little bit of pride. So they came the way they would have done things in Europe. I talked about it in a paper that I wrote about the French and Indian War / 7 Years' War, which I also did a video on. So you can check that out too. Definitely seeing the contrast in the movie between how I already know George Washington implemented his failure to make him a more successful leader was really cool. And also the way the movie was shot, it starts from the point of the movie starts right before the climactic battle, and then it goes everything else is a flashback essentially, because it cuts back to the beginning of his life and works up to the point where he's about to fight the climactic battle. So getting to see that, the opening loop was really good. It was almost one-for-one shots, so it was really helped reinforce the whole hero's journey thing. The hero's journey only works if the hero has failed, and Washington did fail, but he rose from his failure, which made him a hero. So that was really cool. Getting to see him. Yeah. Well, that is the last of my notes that I have. So watch this. All right, no more notes. But let me just close out the video by saying it's a good movie. All things considered, I think it was a really good movie. Definitely not maybe for the historical buffs in your life and your family, but definitely a fun journey either way. Because the information is accurate. It's just also abridged, if that makes any sense. But getting to see the actor who played George Washington, getting to see him display what he might have actually been in real life, in relation to his determination and his drive, that was all really good. The climactic battle bit, bro, I was that guy was a president of the nation I live in. I was wow. But it was a really good movie. I really enjoyed watching it. Oh gosh, I really enjoyed watching it. Not Washington, but I really enjoyed watching it. Oh gosh. I'm just going to end the video now, but definitely go give it a watch if you're in the neighborhood.